Alex here again with another image review. These pictures are all from Lembe, and they're all pictures of seahorses, frogfish and scorpionfish, or those types of fish. I've got lots of pictures I've already processed from Lembe, despite having, and that's why I've picked a subdivision for this run through. But I have loads of pictures despite having not properly gone through my pictures yet, and that's not something I'd really recommend you following me on. I've been kind of recently being lazy and pulling out pictures that I need to process. In this case here, a lot of these were pulled out because I was reviewing the new Sony 100mm lens, although that first shot is by with the Tamron 90mm lens. And because of that, I sort of favoured pictures from that lens and pulled them out. I then went through and thought, oh gosh, I've missed quite a few I really like. So then had a quick look through the other pictures and pulled a few out just to get a more representative set. But ultimately, I've still got about 5,000 pictures from Lembe sitting on this computer's desktop, and I really need to cut those numbers down before I go any further with the editing. But for the ones that I've processed out so far, I can share them. There's kind of 3 videos that are going to come out over the next week or so, running through those pictures, and this is the first of those 3. So let's have a look through some of the pictures. Oh, I'm not in the right software. Let me give it a sec. This first one is a young common seahorse. They're often black when they're young. This particular individual was just drifting down one of the slopes in Lembe on a muck diving site. And I was able to, by using a relatively open aperture, f5, a slow shutter speed of a 40th to get that blue background coming in, I was able to get this shot of it just swimming. It was actually swimming only just above the seabed, but by getting the camera really, really low, and obviously making sure I nailed the focus on its eye, I was able to get this nice portrait of it swimming. It's not the cleanest or prettiest individual, it's covered in muck, but that's the way they often are. On to next, a couple of frogfish. This is a painted frogfish. I photographed this guy many times. I like this photo just because it's got that out of focus foreground and background that gives a bit more depth to the macro shot. This frogfish was hiding in a sort of benthic sponge, and you can see one of the sponge apertures behind the frogfish, and he's kind of tucked into that little gap. So it was nice to shoot him in that position. This is a panning shot of a hairy frogfish just resting on the seabed, just a simple snoot panning shot. Snoot on the face of the frogfish. I shot this on a black background, thought it was a bit dull, so did this one with intentional camera movement to get that blur coming through. So I'd slowed my shutter speed down to a 15th of a second. You set the camera on front curtain sync so that when you press the shutter, you get that spotlight exactly where you want it on top of the subject. And then after the flash has gone, you use the camera movement to create that blur. And because there's no flash in the surrounding parts of the picture, there's no sharpness, so you get a really nice blur. If I zoom in, you can see you get a really nice blur through that part of the picture. But where the fish is, it's nice and sharp. If you just zoom in on there, you can see it's nice and sharp. This is on the same dive and still using the same snoot, but this time aiming the snoot in from the side on the subject. I think this is, for me, a more interesting way to use the snoot than simply spotlighting subjects. And here we've got strong directional light on this humpback scorpionfish that really reveals shapes and textures, but I've made sure that I've got good eye detail coming through in the picture, and nice shapes and shadows and textures across the fish. Another scorpionfish, but this time a rhinopius scorpionfish. This one resting on the seabed in amongst the corals. And I shot this with the EMWL wide-angle macro lens on the 90mm. I might have put the Sony 90mm on for this one. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think this is the Sony 90mm. Let's just check that previous one. Yeah, so this is with the Sony 90mm because it works. The port length is better suited for using the EMWL than the other 90. These are all pictures taken before the Sony 100mm arrived on the trip. And this one is another one of that same orange humpback scorpionfish, but this one is taken with the MFO3, giving that wider angle view. And this is a similar technique to the one of the frogfish, a couple of pictures ago, if we just come out of there, this picture above is shot with a snoot and intentional camera movement. This picture is not shot with a snoot, it's shot with single strobe and again intentional camera movement. And this is shot with single strobe, aimed to create an inward lighting effect. So it was only really lighting the frogfish, not frogfish, the scorpionfish. And then because there was no light anywhere else, any camera movement, just the scorpionfish is nice and sharp because the strobe is freezing him. But then the intentional camera movement on the rest of the picture creates a nice feeling of blur around the subject. And I wanted to get the blur into this shot. I want to get the blue into this shot really because I felt that the blue would look really nice against that orange, and that was kind of a major motivating factor in this picture. And then a portrait of a painted frogfish here. This one isn't actually fishing with its lure, but its lure is not being held against its body. So I quite like this shot just because of the position of that lure. It's a very simple shot, just a frogfish on a black background. There was this kind of quite brightly coloured purpley thing in front of it. And I did consider just darkening that down because it's kind of a bit weird that in this bottom right-hand corner of the shot to have that purple, because there's nothing else purple in the picture. So it's a bit of a random thing. And I think if I maybe I think a lot of photographers might have desaturated that, and maybe I should go and have another look at the file and consider doing that. If the seabed below the frogfish was purple, then I'd really be absolutely fine with this out of focus purple foreground. But it is a bit strange when you've got an out of focus element that doesn't really that looks different to everything else in the frame, and there's no real explanation for it. This is a portrait of a hairy frogfish, just taken with an inward lighting, just to try and bring out the hairiness. This was a large female frogfish, hairy frogfish. She was not especially attractive. She was quite a dirty, very camouflage, very effective coloration. But sometimes when the hairy frogfish have got really long and particularly white or bright coloured hairs, they can look spectacular. This was a really nice size individual, but not especially photogenic. Moving on to a photo of an ornate ghost pipefish. I often find when I go to Lembe in the second half of the year, it's much better for ghost pipefish than in the first half of the year, and this trip was very much the case. There were lots of ghost pipefish to photograph, and they've always been a favourite subject of mine. I find them just such bizarre looking fish. They are wonderful creatures, quite voracious predators as well, and always sort of up to something once you sort of key in and learn to spot them. And this one was hanging around near this hydroid covered old probably an old sea whip or something that's now overgrown with hydroids and tunicate. You can see there on it as well. Right, this is just below that previous shot, obviously, and this is again shot with the EMWL, so wide angle macro shot, and this shot and the next shot are both taken with the same lens, obviously on the same dive, and it's a photo of a scarlet frogfish, so a slightly unusual frogfish species that you don't see. I really like their expressive faces on the scarlet frogfish. If I zoom in on this one, you can see it's got I find it's got a really expressive face, and I particularly like the sweep of the cardinal fish around the frame in this one. You can obviously see why the frogfish is living in this spot, because it's keen to feed on these cardinal fish, and I'm sure it was doing very nicely, thank you. A few days later, there are actually two of these scarlet frogfish on this particular little outcrop, and this is the same outcrop that the ghost pipefish was on, so it was a really rich little area. Okay, moving on to the pygmy seahorses. Pygmy seahorses are a classic Lembe subject. Always nice to see them there. Always good to get some photos. This one you can see has actually got two in the frame. There's the main one here, and then off to the side here there's the back side of another one. I couldn't work the other one into the frame. I'd have ideally not wanted it there, but I don't think it's too distracting. But the main one is nice and sharp, really nice detail, and I like the composition. Having shot pygmy seahorses full in the frame many times. I'm now always looking to take something a little bit different. So I always look for compositions like this where they're off center or just slightly more unusual. Obviously you could crop this and have it full in the frame if you wanted to, but I think a picture like this is often very useful for magazine use. You can have some text at the bottom of this picture or a title, and it would work very nicely. This is the same individual. This individual was at Newdy Falls. There's a very well-known sea fan there that's been at Newdy Falls for the 25-30 years that I've been diving at Lembe, and I would say 9 out of 10 visits there's always pygmy seahorses on it, despite the fact that they're visited by divers, you know, certainly for a couple of dives every day. So yeah, really nice to see that this fan has just carried on doing really well, and also that it's always seems to be full of pygmy seahorses also doing very well. Anyway, on this particular time there was about 4 or 5 pygmies on the fan, but this particular individual, which is the same individual as this, was by far the prettiest of the pygmies on the fan. It was one of the bigger ones as well, and I took lots of different photos, and I like this one just because of the pose. Really, I like shooting them relatively small in the frame. As I said, you know, a small in the frame shot can always be cropped, but a big in the frame shot can't be uncropped. So I like shooting them relatively small in the frame. I think then you've got the sea fan telling more of the story. The polyps on the sea fan are out here looking really pretty. But the individual was wrapped up and attached to this particular bit of the sea fan. And I like that it's kind of hiding behind the sea fan there, poking out. It shows how well its camouflage works, and it's telling that whole story in the picture. Another camouflage shot. The camouflage doesn't look particularly effective here, but that's because I've got flash on the picture. Without flash, this frogfish was very well camouflaged in amongst these rope sponges. And if I zoom in, we can have a look at this very pretty little frogfish with these. It's kind of one of those. It's a white painted frogfish with the orangey yellow dots, which I think look really pretty. And I shot this at different levels of magnification. I kind of started off shooting it quite big in the frame, and just slowly backed out and put the MFO3 on, which I used for this shot, and was able to shoot this wider scene. And actually, my favourite of the series is the one where I'm furthest away, which is this one. But I have got some tighter ones, and you may well see some of those processed in the future. Very close to that frogfish was this seahorse. This is a female common seahorse again, but just a very unusual colour. You don't normally see them in red, so I was drawn to this one just because it was such an unusual colour. Which, yeah, they're normally oranges and yellows, the females, and obviously lots of brown ones. But to have so much red on this one, and this one's also got kind of an almost slightly hairy look to her. If I zoom in, you know, you can see there's almost a fur to her, which is really cool look. And I only saw this seahorse once, but I would have definitely liked to have gone back and tried some different techniques, try some long exposures, try maybe some backlighting to bring out that furriness, because she was a very unusual looking individual. This was another unusual looking individual. This is an ambon scorpionfish up in the shallows, sheltering under this rock. It's unusual to see ambon scorpionfish on their own. They usually live in pairs, and I would say it's reasonably unusual to see them in the shallows. They're often a little bit deeper on dive sites as a rule, but this one was on its own in the shallows, sheltering by this log. And I like this individual for the obvious reason that it has the most magnificent eyebrows you could imagine on a fish. Look at the size of that eyebrow, and yeah, just a very cool looking fish. I often joke about ambon scorpionfish that I'm always very happy to see them in Lembe, but I very rarely process pictures from them because I think all my ambon scorpionfish pictures just end up looking a bit ID like, or they're just never end up as favourites on the trip. There's nothing wrong with them, but nothing especially right from them. So I'm going to make an effort to process a few more out. And the same with some of the frogfish portraits here, actually, like this frogfish here. Nice individual frogfish. Normally I wouldn't process out a picture like this, but I kind of felt, you know, because it's just a very standard shot. But sometimes if you only process out the special images from a trip, they're not always necessarily that representative of the species that you saw. So I processed this one out. It's obviously very quick to process out for that reason. And this is another shot of that same scorpionfish, the orange humpback scorpionfish. And here I've backed away a little bit, shot with the MFO3, and tried to place it small in the frame. It was kind of perched in a little high depression on the slope on this dive site, and I like its positioning in the frame. I like that it's looking up into the water column, hoping for a passing fish to come past for it to get some food, and I like the feeling of the environment around the fish. And there's our scorpionfish again. This is a Pygmy seahorse shot with the 100mm lens, and if you see the camera settings, with the teleconverter as well, that's why it says 140mm lens on this one, and with the MF01, I'm sure, as well, on this picture. And this particular sea fan wasn't especially attractive. This sea fan, it was very shallow water and in full sun, and it was always going to have its polyps in during the day in that conditions. And I don't like to photograph Pygmy seahorses at night because in the day photographing doesn't seem to bother them, but at night they do seem to react to the flash, so I avoid photographing them on night dives. This sea fan, though, because it was in such bright shallow conditions, it was only at 9 meters, so about 27 feet, I guess, something like that. It was very shallow, certainly for Lembe. To see Barky Banties that shallow. But because it was so shallow, the polyps were always in on this sea fan, and it was quite a weak coloured sea fan. It was kind of a whitey pink sea fan. And so I looked for an angle where I could really fill the frame with out of focus sea fan to give this kind of, so at least that whitey pink colour of the sea fan, you didn't just see the detail of the branches of the sea fan. They actually kind of blur into this nice kind of pink mush around the subject, which I think, sets this subject off nicely. It's a bit bigger in the frame as well, simply because the sea fan wasn't overly attractive, so I shot it at a higher magnification, and I, obviously before the dive, had already put that teleconverter on. This is a flasher scorpionfish. It's a close relative of the humpback scorpionfish. They're elongated in comparison to a humpback scorpionfish. Got a longer body, a bit more cigar shaped. And this one had a really, and they're also called short snout scorpionfish because they've got this kind of very squashed face but then longer body, and they're very very similar to a humpback scorpionfish. I've probably misidentified humpback scorpionfish in the past, or misidentified these guys as humpback scorpionfish in the past, but I really like this one. It had a nice texture to it. And also, nice colour as well. I like the white colour. It really looks like a rock, which is what you want. In these, a young thorny seahorse. I think the highlight of this picture for me, which I didn't see at the time of shooting, is this tiny baby brittle star. That's just a couple of segments long on its arms that I've zoomed into there, which was next to the seahorse. This young thorny seahorse, which is kind of cute. It's a nice little shot. This seahorse, actually, we found it right at the beginning of the dive, and the dive guide pointed it out to me, and it was in the shallows, and it was we stayed in the area all dive, and I photographed it early on, and there's some other photographers there, so I'd take some pictures of it. I went away and then came back about half an hour later, knew exactly where it was, I remembered where it was, came back and it had completely gone, and apparently after the guys photographed it swam away, so I didn't get to photograph it again. I just got this one shot of it. A ghost pipefish on a Blackwater dive. This is a larval stage ghost pipefish, maybe a rough snout, I'm not sure. Ghost pipefish, you can see this one's still pretty translucent, but very much nearly as big as the ones that are settling on the seabed. Shot with the MF03 and the Sony 100mm on a Blackwater dive. And this is a Halimeda ghost pipefish. So this is a variety of ghost pipefish. I think it's a species of ghost pipefish that mimics the Halimeda calcareous algae, which you can see some of on either side of the ghost pipefish. It not only does it create the colour of it on its body, but very much the textures of it as well, and the segmented appearance of the Halimeda on the ghost pipefish, and it lives very secretly around those and does very nicely in that environment. That's shot with the MF03 as well, and also with the Sony 100mm. I think this one was shot with the 100mm and the 1.4 teleconverter, all that previous row. This one is 100mm again, but also with the MF03 to give that wider view. It's well suited for some of the bigger subjects on a Blackwater dive. And this is a pelagic pipe horse attached to a blade of seagrass on one of those Blackwater dives. For a wider view here, I'm using the Sony 100mm, but with the EMWL lens, and that gives me this wide angle macro view of this seahorse. This seahorse is a male thorny seahorse, had a lovely red colour, and I really thought that red colour looked great against the blue water, but he was not a poser. This is about the, you know, I'm happy with this shot because I've got eye contact, but you can see he was moving and I probably didn't have the camera completely still as well. So there's quite a bit of ghosting in this image. And that was simply because he wasn't one of those seahorses that just stayed nice and still for me to get my shot. And so, yeah, it's got a bit of ghosting because he was on the move a little bit. These are some of my favourite shots from Lembe, actually. This is a ghost pipefish in the bouquet created by a school of cardinal fish that it was actually hunting. People often think ghost pipefish, they're not voracious predators. They're very much voracious predators. And this is the second time I've got a picture of a ghost pipefish that when you zoom in onto its snout, you can see exactly what it's just eaten. And there's the eye of the ghost pipefish. But further down in its snout, right in the middle of the frame now, you can actually see the eye and the body of one of these cardinal fish that are making a nice bouquet in my picture, but in this particular picture are also making a nice lunch for the ghost pipefish. And this is a photo taken a few minutes later of the ghost pipefish. And you can see this has got those nice out of focus or these in focus fish in the bouquet here in the background, which I really like that effect. And you can't see, he's swallowed that cardinal fish now, and I guess that what's now in the middle of the picture is possibly the cardinal fish in his stomach now. I can't see the eye so clearly in this one, so I'm not sure about that. But it's definitely after the other picture, and the cardinal fish had to go somewhere, so I guess that's it down in his belly. But I like this picture as well. These are just some single strobe shots. This is a single strobe shot of a thorny seahorse just against a black background, just a sort of a low key shot, and then that's a horizontal composition, and this is shot vertically. I think the white balance is a little bit different. So it's actually the same individual, but the white balance just came out a little bit different on these two. And I've not tried. This one probably looks a little bit more correct. This one kind of feels correct as well, but I think it's probably the seahorse has certainly got a bit more red on it on that picture. But I like this selective lighting on the seahorse. I think it really brings out the texture around all the spines on its body, and it shows why seahorses don't face a lot of predation, because, you know, she's pretty well defended with all these thorns across her body, and this lighting I think really shows that off to you, which is why I was lighting them like this. A couple of shots of warty frogfish just on the prowl on the seabed. This was quite a nice coloured individual, and again I wanted to get that blue with that yellow, which is why I've shot it like that. And another picture of my favourite humpback scorpionfish, now shot with the EMWL. She's ended up a bit of a sort of a decapitated head here, because the perspective of the lens has meant her head is massive and you can't even see her body behind it. But I do like that you can see her teeth running down the side of the picture here. It shows that she's a predator, and, you know, obviously got a fantastic sense of smell as well, with these massive inhalant siphons of her nostril, and then this is the exhalant, well, the outward nostril. Fish don't breathe through their noses like we do, so they have two nostril holes on each side, which create a through flow of smell. So whenever you have a fish, you nearly always have a double nostril opening on each side of the face, an inlet and an outlet for the water. And this big one here is the inlet, and there's a smaller outlet behind. A Denise Pygmy seahorse. Let's have a look. Probably, you know, I was going to see if we could see if there's the Denise Pygmy seahorse. I was going to see if we could see if it was a male or a female. On a deeper fan. This was a really beautiful fan, but it was very deep. And with a few photographers around, you never had more than a minute or so to get a couple of photos of it. But it is nice to see a Denise Pygmy seahorse in Lembe. Don't get that every time we go there, although it does depend on the sites that you do. But it was on such a beautiful fan, and I kind of wish I'd got a better shot of it, but I'd only got the chance to shoot it briefly. So yeah, that's the best I got. I was very happy to see the Rhinopius just an incredibly beautiful fish. Shot here with backlighting. The dive guide helped place a torch behind the Rhinopeus and gave us a chance to do these backlighting shots of the Rhinopeus. I took my torch down on this dive, took it, which I don't normally dive with the focus light on my housing in the day, but took it off the housing, and then we were able to use that to backlight the Rhinopeus, which looks pretty cool. And then, there's still a few to go. The final few, there's 3 shots here of a giant frogfish, which was living underneath these boats. These boats are actually Filipino fishing boats that got seized during COVID because they were fishing illegally, and they've been tied up in the Lembeh Strait down by the city for since then, so 5 years or so. And during that time, it's created this amazing underwater habitat underneath. When the seabed is shaded from the sun, corals don't grow so much anymore, but sponges do, and it's a really rich sponge environment. You can see here there's a young barrel sponge growing, and there's a scorpionfish sitting in it. Obviously that giant frogfish has been attracted to the little reef that's grown there. It's a very good area for nudibranchs and yields a lot of interesting images. I've accidentally opened that one. It's going to be trying to open it in Photoshop. Oh dear. There we go. Sorry, I'm just going to close that in Photoshop. This picture here is of a painted frogfish. It's actually the one that was at the beginning of the talk as well. But this one here, I've created the tiniest spotlight with my snoot and just aimed it at its eye. I'm not quite sure what this picture is saying. I'm not sure I like it, but I think it's quite an interesting picture. And probably more one to talk about technique than necessarily to be a kind of finished piece of work. I think the idea is quite nice, but I don't think there's much of a narrative message in the use of technique that I'm particularly interested in. But nonetheless, quite an interesting picture. And then the final shot is of a pair of these cockatoo waspfish. There's one which you can obviously see very clearly, and there's a second one here buried in the sand. You can just see the top of its dorsal fin there. That was sheltering under this leaf. And obviously they cockatoo waspfish very much look like an old leaf on the seabed. And it was good. It was interesting to see them using a leaf as a place to hide on the seabed. So that is a run through that first batch from Lembe. I've got another couple of these to do. And also, if you're interested in any of these pictures, they are on my website. And on my website, you can sort of get all the camera settings from them as well. So hopefully that was interesting. Thank you very much. I'll be back again soon.